Welcome back, everyone, to the Brave Writer podcast. Melissa is here. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Julie. It's great to see you.
Oh, gosh, every week, this is my favorite time. I love talking on the podcast. Thank you all for listening.
What are we going to talk about today?
Oh, my gosh. Well, so I get the question a lot, like, what do? I have 6 kids, or I have 5 kids, or I even have 3 kids, and how do I manage them all at once? But I also get another question that you and I are less skilled at answering, but we're going to try. And that is, what do you do if you have a small family, just 1 child or 2 kids? There are different dynamics at play in both kinds of families. So today, we're going to try to give you tips for what to do with a big family and what to do with a small family when you're trying to create happy learning in the home. Sound like a plan?
Love it. Love it.
Now, first of all, Melissa has 6 kids, so she's the true expert on big families. I only have 5. Just 5. Just 5.
Just 5.
Just 5.
11 kids between us, Julie.
That is true. And I was going to say that I spoke at this one LDS conference, Mormon conference, and I will share this for all our lovely Mormon families that follow, because we have a huge following in the Mormon community. I love you guys. You blow my mind. I spoke at this one conference, and a mom had 10 kids. She came up to me and told me that her ward had just assigned her being in charge of the junior high, like Sunday school. This is something that she did for volunteering, and she had 10 kids who were all school age. And she's like, I don't know how to do it all. And I looked at her and I said, I think it's impossible. So then we had quite the conversation. And while we were talking, a group of moms just all started kind of filling in around, and we had this wonderful exchange. And so today I want to share what I've learned, not only from my own experience, but from talking to parents with truly large families, including you, Melissa. And then we will shift gears and talk about what I've learned from families that have especially just 1 child, but maybe 1 or 2 kids. And those are very different dynamics in the homeschool. So to kick things off, Melissa, what would you say is the most critical thing to know about home educating multiples, like a sizable number of children?
I guess the key factor for me was recognizing that some things were going to be done in a group and some things were going to be done in pairs, me with 1 child. And it was so important for me to be mindful of that balance as ages changed, needs changed, interests changed, life circumstances changed, always keeping in mind, am I creating space for kids to get my individual attention sometimes? And am I thinking of ways that we can all learn together in ways that support the different ages in the room?
That is such a key finding that I think I hear over and over from homeschoolers. One of the things that I heard from several moms who have large families just in the last 2 weeks is that they were realizing that sometimes you were teaching 1 child, sometimes you were teaching 2 children, sometimes you were teaching 3, and sometimes you were teaching the whole group. And I thought that was really important. I remember Jacob is my middle child, so I have 5 kids. And there were times when I had a group of 3 that were older kids and 2 that were the youngers. And then there would be a moment, like a year we'd go up and suddenly he was with the younger 2. And so it was 2 olders and 3 youngers. And it was like he toggled sort of back and forth depending on where we were in various skill sets. So just knowing going in that you have to sort of read the skill levels of your children, and you will sometimes create micro groups to teach. So you have either 2 or 3 or 4 of one kind of category, and then maybe 2 or 3, or even just 1 of another age or another skill set. That is totally normal. It's impossible, I will say this emphatically, to give the exact same amount of attention to each child every single day in every subject. That is a fallacy.
Yes.
You do not have to hit all 6 subjects for all 6 or 10 kids every single day. That is too big of a task to accomplish. So if you're not doing that successfully and you're worried, let us release you from that guilt right now. That is not a requirement to be a successful homeschooler.
That's right. That's right. It didn't work that way in one-room schoolhouses either.
No, that's such a good point. So what would you say your main strategy was for handling like the one-on-one time? What did you do to ensure that sometimes you gave dedicated time, let's say, to the early reader who's just working on phonics and needs only you, not 2 kids, not 4 kids, just that child? What's happening to the other 5?
Okay, I had really concrete strategies for this. One was I paid attention to everybody's preferred waking and sleeping times. Sometimes just having them staggered in their habits meant that they got that one-on-one time. The early riser would get me, and I would make sure that I was geared up to give some time to that person in the morning. I had baskets of toys that were brought out when I was working one-on-one or two-on-one with various kids, right? So that the others had something special to do, or they might be watching TV.
TV is a great help, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's completely valid. And for anybody who worries that that shouldn't be happening during the school day, I will say that my one child who went to school, kid number 4, went to public school the whole way. And he loved to write detailed, minute by minute, schedules are his passion in life, right? So he would write like a blow by blow of the day. And the number of times that I saw teacher put on Word Girl, it was happening at school. I just want to say that.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. We did that too. I would sometimes put on, I remember there was a point where Mary Poppins was like the thing that my youngest daughter loved to watch when we were doing a read aloud that was maybe over her head. So she was by herself watching Mary Poppins on my bed while I was reading to the older 4. I did not worry about it. I want to just remind you that it's okay to sometimes recognize that you are alone. You don't have an assistant teacher. And occasionally that television with that show is the teacher. So don't hate on yourself for that. And you can be strategic. It can be Arthur. It could be Bluey. It could be, some kind of a documentary. It could be whatever show you think is valuable. I had a son who loved Winged Migration. He watched that multiple times. So it doesn't have to just be, Paw Patrol. You can decide what show, but giving them something that's absorbing so they're not constantly popping in and interrupting you is important.
Right. And the container of a show is really useful for marking time.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Another thing that I did, I don't know about you, but I used weird hours. And what I mean by that is I had a son, for instance, I've shared before, where he wasn't capable of focusing on writing during the day because he kept watching birds. They were out the window. And so even if I got the other kids kind of semi-involved, he was distractible. And I finally realized that he could do writing in the evenings when his dad was available. His dad could play with the other kids. We would take 15 minutes, 20 minutes at night in the dark and get it done. So if you've got a big family, remember weekends and evenings are a time for one-on-one attention if you really need to focus on a specific skill with a child who isn't getting enough of you.
That speaks to the helpfulness of recognizing that time just operates differently with homeschooling than it does in school.
That's right.
Kids who are at school for a 6 or 7 hour day are not learning for every minute of those days. And if they're in a 45-minute math class, they're not learning every one of those 45 minutes, right? So if we can free ourselves from feeling this obligation to keep school within school hours, or that learning needs to happen for X minutes a day for, all the subjects, we immediately, instead of having less time of learning happening in our homes, we have more.
That's true.
Because evenings do exist. Weekends do exist.
That's right. And after school exists, right? If there's a time when everything is done and you want to give some extra attention to that one child, maybe you save phonics for when everything else is over. And then that's when you work on phonics with whoever's learning to read. Another thought around this idea of staggering is those kids who are capable of completing some work on their own, they can be given clipboards to work on their own thing, maybe in the same room, while you stay at the table with the child who needs dedicated attention. So that's a way of cultivating a little bit of independence, but still under your supervision. Or, depending on the size of your house, if you've got 2 tables in the same room, you can have the table where mom is working with kids and you rotate which child is doing math with you. And then the other kids are at the other table doing as much math as they can by themselves. And you rotate through who needs the attention.
And if there's a kid who's a little older, who's working on something that requires concentration that they're doing independently, well, then it's my role to create the space for that, right?
Yes.
So my primary function in those times was to keep the little ones out of their hair.
Yeah, that's right. And then I also have heard of some families where, and I learned this from some of the very, very big families where you have 10 kids, there was sort of a older child, younger child buddy system, so that if you were working with someone and the little toddlers were getting in the way or whatever, they would rotate who played with the toddler for 15 minutes, right? So I'm not talking about parentification. I'm not talking about brushing their teeth, putting on their clothes, being their disciplinarian. No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about reading some picture books to the 4-year-old just so that you can focus on the 7-year-old for 20 minutes, right? Like that.
Yes. Watercolor painting.
Oh, yeah.
Sculpey clay. Those were things that mixed ages of my kids did really enjoy doing together. The older ones like playing with little kids if they don't feel like they're being made to babysit.
That's it. That's right. Yeah. In fact, we should go through a list of supplies. You said Sculpey dough. What was the other one you said?
Watercolors.
Watercolors. A third one is pipe cleaners. A fourth one is popsicle sticks and a low heat glue gun. Oh my gosh, the things they will make.
Right. Dot paints,
felt, finger knitting, like those it looks sort of like a mushroom or whatever, and you're finger knitting and creating a long, or even just knitting, puzzles, tangrams. These are all sort of activities that have value, origami, that have value to the learning brain, but are a little bit different than just playing with toys or watching TV. So if you create kind of this creative station that they can return to, and depending on their skill set, some kids will do cross stitch or embroidery, depending on how skillful they are. And there's one more. I think they're called wiki sticks.
We loved those, Julie. And beeswax, too. We would get the modeling beeswax.
Yep.
A little box of things from nature, little shells and a piece of driftwood, acorns. And you can use
pine cones. Totally.
Sculpey or Play-Doh or beeswax to stick it and make little, sculptures.
And then you can add Lego people and make little environments for them. Like that is...
Oh, yes.
That is amazing.
The Roxaboxen.
What?
The Roxaboxen. I forgot all about this. Oh, my goodness. There's a wonderful picture book by Barbara Cooney called Roxaboxen. And it's about these children that go out into a field and they make a little house where they use stones to create the walls and things, or, the boundaries of the house.
Yeah.
Well, my kid number 2 and 3 made a Roxaboxen in the backyard, and they would do anything you wanted as long as they could do it in the Roxaboxen.
I love that. I mean, that's exactly it. Like creating little worlds that they can play in. We used to put the Sculpey clay, we would divide it up, or actually not even Sculpey, it was just the modeling clay. It wasn't the baked clay. And we would put it on cookie sheets. Each child had their own cookie sheet, and they were just building homes with modeling clay. And the reason we didn't use Sculpey is because they were free to remodel. Remodel their home.
Oh, we never baked Sculpey. I couldn't get it together to do the baking and not burn it after I ruined a beautiful elephant once.
Oh my gosh. That's super funny.
This is where my role in making sure that the older kids were able to have good relationships with their younger siblings by not having their work destroyed or interfered with. They would make all these Sculpey creatures, and because they weren't baked, they were very squashable, Julie.
Yeah, I know.
And so I had to be instrumental in creating a space where those things could live, giving them a case where they could close it up and put it on a shelf out of reach so that none of the precious creations were squashed.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's an essential point for this audience on this topic. I'm out of touch with it a little bit, so I'm glad you remembered that. I keep thinking about my grandchildren, like toddlers love Matchbox cars, and they love just the old traditional yellow or orange race car tracks, right? And they love things that they can line up, like all the little plastic animals from the zoo that you can buy, right? So thinking about all these items that help kids stay sort of occupied in meaningful ways, not just passively, is a nice way to outfit your home. And I love that you said you bring them out when you need them. They're not just available all the time. Magnetic tiles, magnetiles, those are another one. Building blocks, Duplos, Lego, obviously, all of that.
And you can give a kid a baking sheet, a cookie sheet to use magnets on so they can sit on their bed. I want to say, Julie, that one of our longest and most fruitful practices in my home was a quiet time. It happened after lunch almost every day for years. And what quiet time looked like changed depending on the ages of the kids. Was I nursing a baby? But what I would try to do is rotate. So every day a different kid got me for quiet time, and the other kids they could read, they could listen to music, they
Beautiful.
could play, on their beds. It was just a kind of bringing it down time. I know sometimes moms really, really need that quiet interval for themselves.
Yes.
And I respect that.
Yeah. No, I did it where I took the time for myself, probably because I was pregnant so frequently and I always needed a nap and to get my feet off the ground, right? Just to put them up a little bit. But no, that's absolutely right, especially if you do have a toddler or a baby. My favorite feeling in the whole world is when a baby is asleep in the house. It's like the whole house has snow on it. Everything is quiet. We're all kind of careful. And so during that season, using the nap time as the time to give focused attention, especially to either the preschooler or the early elementary schooler, kindergarten or first grade, is really meaningful, and it will pay dividends. And of course, it will change because then that nap changes, right? Nothing lasts forever.
Right.
But these are all ways to attempt to manage that. And then one more thing I'll say is, especially with older kids, as they start to get into those later grades, junior high, high school, enroll them, if you can, in either online classes or in-person classes or co-ops for some of those subjects, because having a group of their peers around them and maybe external due dates will create a little less pressure on you. And it's a nice thing to have someone else saying, this is due when, and then you come along to help them produce it, rather than you being all of the things. Because I've heard from a lot of parents who have a lot of kids, when they get to junior high and senior high, they want their kids to be really independent. But those kids still need like the container of due dates, support, interaction. And so if you need it, Brave Writer's got a ton of really great online classes that last 4 to 6 weeks. There are other, OutSchool has classes. That's a wonderful place to look. But then there are also in-person co-ops, even in-person classes. A whole collection of nurses in my homeschool community did an entire biology and then chemistry class for teenagers, and you could just pay and go once a week, right? So talk to your community and see if you can collaborate to create those opportunities.
We had really great experiences with, there was a science teacher in our town who taught high school. He did the lab science piece.
Yes.
So you could do the study piece on your own, but go once a week. And he had all the equipment.
Yeah, you can do the dissection. You can do the microscope work. Exactly.
The moms in my homeschooling circle in San Diego often brought me in to do a 6-week poetry workshop, or we did a geography workshop every year that was really, really fun. So, and that was a great fit because there were other moms who could watch my younger kids while I was teaching the older kids and working with them. Also, I never had to host. I'm bad at hosting. I could show up and do the part that I could do. So finding, a friend or a couple of friends that you can rotate with and pool things. We once were part of a very small group co-op, and it operated exactly on that level of one mom would sort of be in charge of the bigs, one the middles, one the littles.
Yep.
And we would just switch up.
Are you looking to spark some interest in writing in the new year? I'd like to recommend our Brave Writer online writing classes. They are specially designed for the busy parent. We like to give you immediate support as you face writing obstacles with your child. First of all, Brave Writer takes a unique approach. We think it's important for kids to have supportive encouragement and emotional safety in writing. Our writing coaches are kind, and they offer robust feedback that addresses every part of the writing process, from idea to finished product. Our classes are short. They run between 3 and 6 weeks with rolling enrollment, meaning new classes start every Monday. And because our classes are asynchronous, you can log in when it's convenient for you. Our most popular classes sell out, so register soon. You can see a sample class and learn more about our program by going to the link in the show notes. So if we are to pivot now and talk about small families, how does homeschooling, what are the challenges for teaching just one child or even just two?
So, it's funny, as I've been thinking this through, Julie, although I have 6 kids, because my 4th child went to school, it did create these 2 sort of pocket families so that my 3 oldest were kind of lumped together for much of the time. And then my 2 youngest were lumped together. And by then, the older ones were in college or they were teenagers, right?
Sure.
It did take different strategizing. And one thing I had to keep in mind was that as my kids got older, the demands on my time changed. And when I wasn't having babies anymore, I was taking on more outside work. So how I structured time really changed. I had to think about, so one of the ways, and of course I did this with the older ones too, but with the 2 youngest, it was particularly helpful, was grouping them for as many subjects as possible, while never going, too down for the one and too up for the other.
That makes sense. If you have 2 kids within 2 or 3 years of each other, keeping them together seems like that would be the most advantageous. And then making real choices about when you spend one-on-one time so each child feels like they get a good piece of you would be important. I know one of my friends was a mom of an only child. And a couple of the things I remember her telling me about this, and I've talked to a lot of families since then, but this is particular to this one mom, and I really loved it. She said, the first thing you have to let your only child know, because a lot of times they don't have siblings, so they don't have the pressure and culture of school just happening around them. And the mom and the child, when there's an only, tend to be a little bit more like peers. There's less of like this authority over a household. It's like you're just doing life together. She said she always liked to emphasize the privileges of being an only. For instance, her daughter got to take 2 musical instruments, not just one. Her daughter got to play or take skating lessons, which are really expensive because there were no other kids. So she tried to help her see that she was getting some of these advantages that families with lots of kids weren't getting, because occasionally she'd be a little jealous of not having the full group. And then the second thing is that it was especially important when you have an only child to put them in group settings, not just one-on-one lessons. So joining a theater group or being on a sports team that's a team, not just, indoor rock climbing where it's a solo, although they have teams too, and you can get to know kids at a rock gym. So I don't want to discount that. But putting them in context where they are getting group learning is really meaningful for these only children. And then in addition, paying attention to their interests and allowing their interests to really guide the learning. You have such an advantage when you just have one child, and that child can go deep, deep, deep into the thing they care the most about, and you can really take it there with them. And so my book, The Brave Learner, where we talk about the continent of learning, might be especially valuable for that only child family, so that you can value the interest, but find all the adjacencies of the subject so you don't feel like you're getting behind.
If you have a special interest or a special area of expertise, one thing you can do for your only child or For your lonely child, I did this when, at a certain point in time, my oldest, best homeschooling buddy went to school, and it was like fifth grade. So it was a big shift to how our lives were working. So she was a lonely child. I started a club. I know a lot about Shakespeare. I can jump in and do theater games without a lot of preparation. That was key. I had a lot on my plate. I wasn't going to be able to like put together a really robust lesson plan for any activity or do a lot of prep. What can you do? What do you know enough about? Maybe it's cooking. Maybe it's sewing. Maybe it's carpentry. Maybe it's just how to fix stuff around the house, right? Like
Yeah.
you can put out the invitation and just, 2 or 3 or 5 kids to come to your house and do the thing that you're leading it, can be a great way to incorporate that group learning experience.
I love that you brought that up because one of my favorite families that had one daughter are British, and they did not know many homeschoolers, right? Homeschooling is not as big in Britain as it is in the United States, and they lived in a town where there just really weren't home educating families. And so she started doing poetry tea times with all the kids who went to school in their neighborhood with their daughter. So it was after school, and they would come to their house and have poetry tea time. It eventually morphed into book clubs. And she said it was funny how they thought they needed to find homeschoolers, but as it turned out, the public school kids were so intrigued by this novel style of learning that they were actually more enthusiastic in some ways because they were like, wow, this is what reading a book can be. This is what poetry can be. So you don't have to limit yourself to homeschoolers for your only child. You can reach out to the existing community.
Such a great point, Julie. And also, like, read alouds alone are a thing that homeschooling kids tend to get much more of than many other children. And that is one of our strong points. When I was saying just now about you may have skills that you have this expertise in that you could offer, a little 4-week, 6-week group for your child and their friends or other kids. If you think, oh, I don't really have anything like that, I can't think of anything, get the community college in your town will probably have like what do you call it? Continuous learning. What's the
continuing education?
Continuing education. That's it. Flip through it. Look at what's being taught there. Something in that catalog is something that you know a lot about. You know how to do. Maybe it's mushrooms. Maybe maybe it's how to wire a lamp. It is really fun to flip through and say, all right, adults are teaching other adults in these areas. I have something that I know about that I could share with kids.
It's interesting that you bring up continuing education because I think one of the advantages of being an only child is that you can fit into adult contexts more easily because there aren't all these other kids in tow. So might they like going to a library lecture? Could they audit a class at the junior college even when they're in junior high? Could they go to a lecture with you that's interesting to you? One of the untapped experiences that I think is important for all homeschooled kids is volunteer work. And because if you have one kid, the schedule revolves around that kid, you could do it together or the child could do it on their own. They could work in an animal rescue. They could be a teaching assistant at an elementary school. They could do candy striping where they volunteer at an ER or a hospital. They could go and visit like an old folks home where my mom lived. We had these kids who would come in and sing and entertain like on a weekend. There are so many ways that they could use their talents and gifts to bless other people. So that's another opportunity for connection. It doesn't always have to be with their peers. It can be with adults as well.
You can also put the word out in your community or to your adult friends. Often, there is an adult in your life who could use some assistance with some aspect of their work. I'm going to give an example. When I was writing The Nerviest Girl in the World, it was set in La Mesa, California, where I had lived for 11 years, but I moved a month after I sold the book on proposal. I had to write the book and I didn't live there anymore. I could not fly back and forth to go to the Historical Society to do some research, but I knew there were specific things I wanted. So I contacted a high school student that I had taught a literature class to, a homeschooler, And she lived around the corner from it. She went and she learned some really valuable research skills. I paid her for her time. She was able to put that on her college applications.
It's amazing.
There are people in your world who could use help with something. Maybe somebody wants to build garden boxes and they need another pair of hands. There you go.
Maybe they know technology really well and they can help set up printers.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Like those are ways. Yes, exactly. So the idea, especially if you're in this one-on-one dynamic, obviously your child's opinion about staying home is really important. Like you shouldn't keep them home just because you still want to homeschool. On the flip side, being homeschooled as an only can be incredibly rich because of all the opportunities they can take advantage of. I do want to recommend here that you listen to our podcast with Blake Bowles. And we should also recommend his books, which are in our bookshop. Why Are You Still Going to School? And the Teenage Liberation Handbook. For some only kids, they just need a glimpse. They could do an outward bound program. They could become good at backpacking. They might want to build, low-tech housing in their backyard. I don't know. There are so many ways they could use their time, but here's what's great. You're available to support it. You don't have to say, well, I'm sorry, we got 9 other kids and I can't devote that much energy to your thing. So see this as like a unique opportunity to turbocharge this child of yours.
With 1 or 2 kids, you may be better able to sign up for activities or programs that cover a longer time span. One of my big tips for people with a lot of children or like an older kid, little kid spread is when possible, try to do things in 4, 6, 8 week increments rather than commit to a year-long thing. Now, sometimes there's going to be an amazing program you want to participate in that's year-long.
Right.
I'm not saying it never works. I'm just saying because of the changing nature of need in a family with kids of many ages, it can be a lot easier. I remember one time signing up for a year-long, go to the art museum every 2 weeks program.
Oh, there you go.
And for me, that was a big mistake.
I will say, though, I love that you brought that up because when I was in grad school, ironically, that was when Liam was the most interested in the Cincinnati Zoo. He loved animals. And the zoo was around the corner from grad school, and they have an entire evening program for junior high students. So we found a program for him, and I would drop him off, go to my class, come back, pick him up, take him home. And he did that for a couple of semesters. And it was just really exhilarating for him to get out of the house, be on his own, learn something he cared about, drive with me each way. Now, these are very personally tailored experiences that we're sharing, but hopefully it could give you some vision, right? Like if your child really loves astronomy, do you have an observatory in your town? Could your child go there and learn from, mature astronomers and learn how to see the solar system with them? If your child's really into cooking, I remember Jacob signed up for a cake decorating class at Michael's, and it was all adult women and Jacob, We still have his cake decorating kit downstairs. Like, don't be intimidated by the fact that these things are designed for adults. Those only children in particular are so skillful around adults. So it's like the whole world is open to you.
And there can be a lot of enthusiasm from the adults in the room.
Oh, yeah.
When my youngest did a woodworking class and was the youngest by about 20 years. He got so much support and encouragement from the adults in the class.
Yeah. They won't bully him. I'll tell you that.
No.
The adults are great. You don't have to worry about bullying. It's amazing.
One thing that I'm thinking about as we're talking about this is, and I think it works in 2 directions. So one, I'm going to say in those scenarios that we painted where you've got older kids maybe spending time with younger kids while you're working one-on-one with someone else.
Yeah.
And I mentioned like trying to balance it and making sure that they get some one-on-one, but also really important to make sure that they get some space, some downtime.
Oh, yeah.
You don't fill every minute with activity and certainly not with chores. Giving them a place to do the thinking, maybe the writing, maybe the just, noodling that is necessary for deep learning. And the one-on-one experiences, I want to say it can be a lot for a kid, like if you're sitting opposite each other at a table and they just feel like the spotlight is on them, that can be really off-putting. And so always thinking, how could this be a parallel learning experience? How could it be a side-by-side activity?
I love that. When we talk about free writing and Brave Writer, we always say the parent writes too. It's not just the child. So if there's just one child, it becomes even more important that you yourself have things that interest you, that you aren't getting your high secondarily through your child, that it's the child's performance that makes you feel like you have a worthwhile life. That's a lot of pressure on any child, but an only child, it's like double. So give yourself permission, maybe even an assignment, to have things that you're interested in, stuff you listen to, books you read, aspects of living that you feel compelled to know more about, and create some of that parallel learning, free write at the same time, and give your child that opportunity to tell you when it's too much intense gaze. Because I think that really is the hardest part with an only child, is there's just a lot of focus on that child's life, and they sometimes need a little break from us.
We can do it with our large families as well. If the younger kids are in an activity, maybe you and the older one can go to a coffee shop and have your side-by-side working or reading time.
Yeah.
In that context.
And don't underestimate the value of playing games and playing cards and watching like the entire Pride and Prejudice series together every day with popcorn. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really important for the life part of homeschooling to exist in all families, but especially with that only child, so they don't feel like they are your career. We don't want that child to feel like they're your career.
Right.
They're your child.
Before we wrap up, Julie, I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you approached when you were grouping kids of different ages together in a certain subject. How did you tailor it for kids at different ages that's included everybody?
So we did a lot of coloring because everybody can color at their own level, right? So I remember we used the Well-Trained Mind's Story of the World, and she had these like activity books that went with them, and we did all the activities. So if there was like, draw this scene that you just read about, the child who was in 8th grade drew a much more realistic and interesting picture sometimes than the 4-year-old. But the 4-year-old had colors and drew their own version of whatever they thought they heard. So there was a lot of like self-expression. Same thing with like writing. Some of my kids were just writing captions while others were capable of writing whole paragraphs. When we did art appreciation, we had notebooks for each child. They would draw the painting and then they would narrate. And the ones who had to narrate orally with me jotting down, that's what I did. The ones that were older, they did the writing. I've even framed some of them and they're hung up in my house as art because I enjoyed it so much. So part of it, I think, is acknowledging that a child is going to respond to an assignment at their skill level. We're not measuring skill levels. We're letting them respond at their skill level. And a prompt is just prompting them to demonstrate where they are. The prompt is not defining what they should accomplish, right? So for history, we did a lot of that. We did clay modeling, we did acting out, we did parties, and all kids could participate no matter what level they were.
Right, right. For us, I would often have a list of read alone books that I would pair with a read aloud if the read aloud was historical or, related to a certain subject. Also, I would have a stack of picture books and related. And so the older kid would enjoy reading those books to the younger kids. Picture books, you're never too old for, and sometimes they're the best door into a topic, I find.
No, they're fantastic. I always felt like if you got picture books and children's nonfiction around whatever topic you're on, and then you're reading a historical fiction read aloud, suddenly you've really got it cooking now.
Right.
And it'll address all the various levels. So yeah, that's really good. And then when we did things for science, experiments involve everybody. Everyone wants to try, and some need a lot of help and some don't want any help. But again, the output, their ability to write up a lab report or draw the picture of dissecting the daisy, it's going to match what they're capable of. but they could all have the same opportunity. That's how I saw it.
I have shared that if there was anything that involves rote learning, we like to use songs to help fix those things in our minds. And that was a great way for me to include kids of all ages.
Yes.
We could sing the song and then take it a little farther with each kid up the ladder.
Well, I don't know if we covered it all, but I hope that stimulates a bunch of ideas for big and little families. I know sometimes 2-kid families can even be harder. And I just want to say real quickly that when they're close in age, sometimes competition is a factor. And so it can be valuable to have different assignments when there are only 2 kids, so that you eliminate the comparison game, because between 2, it can be a lot more intense. So let's say you are studying something like the Civil War in the United States. Let them write about different things. Don't have both of them write about the Gettysburg Address. Have one kid do that and someone else do another aspect of that topic. That way you kind of protect and preserve their autonomy instead of pitting them against each other.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that became very important at a certain point when 2 of my kids were doing the same math.
Yes.
And the older one began to have feelings about doing the same math as the younger one. And
it happens with learning to read, where suddenly a younger child knows how and the older child doesn't yet. This happens in homeschool all the time. You really have to protect that. If you have a child who hasn't read yet and their younger sibling already does, it's going to be hard. They are going to have feelings about that. And you can insist that everything's normal and they still can feel badly about it. At which point, what you want to reassure them is they will read and you will do what it takes to make sure that they learn, and that it will come over time, and that you will sit with them through all the feelings they have about it. That's about the best you can do in that situation.
And sometimes if it can become the thing that that child gets extra one-on-one time with you for,
yes,
it actually, they have feelings of specialness about it.
That is perfect. Well, thank you, Melissa. These are wonderful ideas. We admire all of you. I just want to say that when I met so many moms just last week, I thought to myself, this is a Herculean task. I can't believe I did it. And I look at you and the level of conscientiousness and dedication and heart and warmth and love that infuses the choice to homeschool is noteworthy. And we see you. We get it. We love you. We're so inspired by you. We are trusting you to raise good, moral, humane people because we need them in our world. So thank you for doing that job.
Absolutely. And they love to learn. And that's what is so exciting when you're sending people out in the world who still love learning and know how to access it.
Yep, that's the key. Well, thank you, Melissa. And we'll talk to everyone again next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, that's another Brave Writer episode in the books. Thanks for joining Melissa and me today. We love it when you leave us reviews, when you send us comments via text message. We read them all. We also couldn't do this show without our fabulous production team at Nova, or Jeanette Hall, the Brave Writer team member who handles all those administrative details you know nothing about. In the meantime, we hope that you have a fantastic week. Keep going, think well. We're rooting for you.